Punishing news for Google.
Yeah, we now know the specifics of the US government's line of attack on Alphabet, Google's parent company, in the biggest antitrust trial of this century. The Justice Department has filed for the tech giant to separate from its Chrome browser. You probably use it regularly, along with 3.5 billion people globally. It's also asked the DC federal judge dealing with the case to warn Google that if monopolistic misconduct continues, it should lose its Android mobile phone operating system as well. It all revolves around Google search. In August, the judge ruled that Alphabet had maintained an illegal monopoly over how we search the internet, reaping massive rewards from advertising as a result. Google's now hoping that the antitrust lawsuit goes the same way as Microsoft's did in the early 2000s. That was thrown out on appeal. But with the US changing administrations, if anyone tells you they know what's going to happen, don't listen.
Some other big tech news, and this was really hugely anticipated on markets. NVIDIA's latest results, they've disappointed.
Yeah. Welcome to the bizarre world of AI, where doubling your revenue year on year can be a disappointment. NVIDIA made more than $35 billion in the third quarter and expects even more revenue next, but this was in fact their slowest growth in 7 quarters. And because expectations for the world's most valuable company are sky high, NVIDIA's stock was down 2.5% on the news after hours. The company dominates production of AI chips and says demand will continue to exceed supply for the next few quarters because of supply chain constraints, but its gross profit margins are still over 70%, which is an absurd markup, Charles.
There's a world first for social media regulation out of Australia.
Yeah, the Australian government's having a crack now, introducing a law banning social media for children under 16, except for online gaming and messaging apps. Let's take a listen to Communications Minister Michelle Rowland.
The bill puts the onus on social media platforms, not parents or young people, to take reasonable steps to ensure fundamental protections are in place. This is about protecting young people, not punishing or isolating them, and letting parents know we're in their corner when it comes to supporting their children's health and well-being.
The bill has wide support and will come into effect 1 year after being passed. Critics say, though, it's going to be hard to enforce, and the fines for non-compliance are up to around 30 million euros, arguably not that much of an incentive for these multi-billion-dollar companies. France, meanwhile, keeps threatening to ban social media and even phones for young children, but so far has only managed to impose parental consent for those under 15.
And France, staying in France, struggling to impose itself when it comes to the export of cognac.
Yep, that's right. On the sidelines of the G20 summit in Brazil, French President Emmanuel Macron urged China's President Xi Jinping to lift tariffs on imports of the liqueur. The measures are a retaliation against EU tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Andrew Hillier has more.
In the tariff tit-for-tat between the EU and China, it's France's cognac producers who are feeling the squeeze. Beijing's decision to slap tariffs of up to 40% on imports of EU brandy last month was in response to the EU's own duties on Chinese electric vehicles. At the G20 summit, French President Emmanuel Macron urged his Chinese counterpart to scrap the measures.
I'd like Prime Minister Barnier to travel to China in the first quarter of next year to see his counterpart, Prime Minister Qiang, so that there can be a discussion at the end of this technical process, which, I hope, will enable us to clear up any misunderstandings and allow us to find out why there are tariffs in the first place.
The tariffs are another headache for the French government. China accounts for a quarter of cognac exports, earning the sector around €1 billion annually. France's producers claim they're hostages in the ongoing trade dispute, begging French leaders to step in. The consequences of the import duties could have knock-on effects right the way down to local producers and wine growers, at a time when French farmers are already unanimous in opposing a trade deal with Mercosur. France's alcohol industry is also bracing itself for the return of Donald Trump to the White House. The US president-elect promised a universal 10% tariff on all imports, bringing back painful memories of 2019, when he imposed duties of 25% on EU goods, including French wine.